Who told the first lie? In the Holy Bible, the 2nd and 3rd chapters of the book of Genesis give the order of events leading us to find out who told the first lie. We find them in the story of the Garden of Eden. Many Bible students have been led to believe the first lie was told to Eve by the serpent, "Ye shall not surely die." That was not the first lie. By comparing the words of God spoken to the man Adam with the words of God which were repeated by the woman who was later to be named Eve, this study will attempt to reveal the first lie by pointing out the first liar. The order of events relating to this subject in the book of Genesis. God made man, and Yahweh Elohim formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Genesis chapter 2 and verse 7. God planted the Garden of Eden and put the man there. And Yahweh Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. Genesis chapter 2 and verse 8. God made trees grow out of the ground outside and inside the Garden of Eden, and out of the ground made Yahweh Elohim to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Genesis chapter 2 and verse 9. God put the man in the garden, and Yahweh Elohim took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and keep it. Genesis chapter 2 and verse 15. God gave the man the laws, and Yahweh Elohim commanded the man, saying, "Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die." Genesis chapter 2 and verse 16 and 17. God made the woman and gave her to Adam, and Yahweh Elohim caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh thereof, and the rib which Yahweh Elohim had taken from man made he a woman, and brought her unto the man. Genesis chapter 2 verses 21 and 22. The serpent questioned the woman. As God said, "Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden." Genesis chapter 3 and verse 1. The woman quoted the law to the serpent as she knew it, and the woman said unto the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die." Genesis chapter 3 verses 2 to 3. The serpent's first statement, "And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die." Genesis chapter 3 and verse 4. The first lie has often been taught to be this first statement by the serpent to the woman, "Ye shall not surely die." But that was not the first lie. You can discover the first lie in the scriptures for yourself. First, consider God's commandment given to Adam in Genesis chapter 2 verses 16 and 17, which must be noted is after God put the man in the garden and before God made the woman for Adam, with verses 21 and 22 showing us that the woman could not have overheard God telling the man the commandment. Second, compare what you found in Genesis chapter 2 verses 16 and 17 with the woman's quote in Genesis chapter 3 verses 2 and 3, where she spoke what she believed God had said. Notice this is before any statement by the serpent, who had only questioned the woman about God's rule regarding the trees of the garden in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 1. Third, it is important to state it was not the woman who was the liar. For proof, consider 1 Timothy chapter 2 verses 13 and 14. Adam was not deceived, but the woman, being deceived, was in transgression. This statement would also seem to say that the woman was not the one to change the law when she repeated what she believed it to be. This comparison reveals that God's commandment to the man had been added onto and diminished from. The words of God were added onto, neither shall you touch it. Note, Adam was told to dress and keep the garden. That would mean all the trees would need to be touched. Genesis chapter 2 and verse 15. The words of God were diminished from. The woman wasn't told that the tree with the forbidden fruit was the tree of knowledge of good and evil. She was told not to eat of the tree in the midst of the garden. To see which tree is in the midst of the garden, see Genesis chapter 2 and verse 9. The commandment seems unclear. Could she have been unsure which tree contained the forbidden fruit? Adam was the one given the commandment directly from God. Had Adam passed the law to the woman wrongly? The first lie, as mentioned in John chapter 8 and verse 44, isn't recorded as such, but the woman's quote of it infers that Adam, as the first false teacher, told the first lie. Jesus Christ, Moses, and Jeremiah warn all people who study God's word to keep it pure, whether they are hearing it or speaking it. See Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 2, chapter 12 and verse 32, Matthew chapters 23 and 24, Revelation chapter 22 verses 18 and 19, Jeremiah chapter 23 verses 9 to 40. All of us who share the scriptures with others must be aware of this warning. It is a big responsibility to keep ourselves out of that family of false teachers, serpents, by preserving truth to our best ability.